A true work of fiction does all the following things and does them elegantly and efficiently. It creates a vivid and continuous dream in the reader's mind. That's from John Gardner on writing. And what he's talking about applies normally to fiction, but I want to posit that this is the idea of how to edit a newspaper and lay it out in such a way that you have maximizing the reader's enjoyment of it. I want to talk about how I go from printed version of the newspaper all the way back from starting with a bunch of articles in a Google Doc. My inverted pyramid, we talk about inverted pyramid when we're writing things, but it starts with our hierarchy, number one, being our visual consistency. Everything looks cohesive and singularly created. This entire pyramid is made to keep the dream of the reader in mind. The reader of this newspaper is going to be taken away by every kind of thing. And I think breaking that dream in any way makes it easier for them to put the paper down and begin to do something else. Any one of these, I believe, contributes to them being removed from the action of reading. So visual consistency, I think, is the key. It is looking over the entire paper, and it looks cohesive. It looks like it's been created singularly. Every different story is in the same font, it's in the same size. It is laid out in the right way. You know what a headline looks like, you know what a byline looks like. The mental effort of reading goes down. Next is readability. This gets into the actual article level of the paper. So when they're reading a typo, a small paragraph, something that makes it hard for them to read, columns that don't go to the right place they're expecting. These are all small hiccups that I believe to pull them out of doing the actual work of reading. And then finally, formatting. White spaces, images, etc. Little stuff, things that they might not notice if they're not getting into an article. But this inverted pyramid is my overall ethos when I'm laying out a paper. Everything looks cohesive so that the idea of you're not thinking I'm reading this paper, you're following these paragraphs, going story from story because it makes sense and it looks like you understand the rules of the game. At our school newspaper, we follow these certain guidelines. They're not set in stone. If you see there on the bottom, everything exists to serve the readability and cohesiveness of our paper. You can see all of these different ones. Body paragraphs look like this, headlines, bylines, other considerations. But the more important thing is all of this can change. All of this can change, and I think the paper would not suffer, but the idea that there is a guideline is what matters. Almost every newspaper and publication has a brand guideline, has a style guideline, and what I think they're trying to do is to keep the reader and the audience there and knowing what to expect. They know the rules of the game. When you go to a baseball game, when you go to a football game, you know what the refs could call fouls on. They're not going to make new fouls. So we have our specific guidelines, and so what I'm going to do is take you from Google Doc all the way to ready to send off to the printer. I have over here all of our stories. These stories are just in Google Doc. I've taken away any of the formatting, so it's just default formatting. And I have headlines. I took out the bylines. I've tried to take out most of the identifying markers and change some of the names. So in here, what we're going to do is take these and put them in our paper. Ours is going to be called Liberty Bell. Your newspaper will be called whatever you get to. So let's start with the newspaper. So what we're going to do is start from new document. We have our preset details. We have our width being 260 millimeters, our height being 370. Those are dictated by our printer. They've changed as we've changed printers. We have a 10 millimeter technical margin. You could be doing this in inches, in points, in pixels, but ours is going to be a set like this. Columns, we are going to use 4 text columns. That's what we've been doing, and we like that a lot. And we are ready to go. So I'll just create here. So you should be able to see our new document. It is set up in such a way that you can see the 4 columns. There's a small gutter here. That's what we call that space in between. That 10 millimeters is up here on the top and all around. What we're going to do next is we're going to talk about how to set up this paper. We have this page, and if I wanted to add more pages, I can come up here and say, let's say we'll make a 4-page paper. That will add our pages. That's page 1 on one side, 2, 3, and finally 4. Once I get to this point, what I like to do is actually come over here. I make a fake paper that is just something I can mock up. I've taken all of my articles here and given them little post-its. These are all different length articles, and you can see they are going to fit in our paper in a certain way. So not every article is going to be represented in this box, but it is my starting point to see how I want to lay the paper out. We have sections in our paper. They pretty much go news first, and then the next one is typically sports, opinions, and arts. Of course, this can be much more broad. We normally do 8 or 12 pages. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to do 4 pages. So what we're going to do now is basically lay out our paper. It's not going to be perfect, and that is okay. We're going to lay it out with things like, for example, we had volleyball champions as one article. I think that should be front, top of the fold. Top of the fold means when the paper is folded in half, you can still see it. So that'll be our first story. I can fold this over if I want to make even less space. And then next piece should be something from here. Let me think. I know I want my sports together, so let me just start putting sports on the same page. After you've gone through each of your stories, you should know about how long they are. And our rule of thumb for our paper is about 1,000 words on one page. That's not perfect, and it changes, and it's really flexible, but we have about 1,000 words. Each of these stories is around 500, so I feel confident doing that. I will have to edit some. So for example, we have PSAT, we have college prestige, and Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, I thought could go in news, so I might leave that out. Let's put Eurydice here, concert there. I'm actually going, so I might do this. I'm going to put the Stewart profile on the bottom, and then Taylor Swift here, and then I might end it on the opinion side. And I'm not committed to all this. This stuff could change the minute I start importing stuff. But you can see how this is much quicker to lay out than anything in InDesign. InDesign is not the most friendly for quick changes. I think I can lay out an entire paper in about a minute using my simple method, and I can start to get a visual of what it looks like. I can maybe see if there's going to be holes, if I need to cut stuff. So let's start with this. How much do I have in my news section? Perfect. Okay. So I have my fake paper. I'll come back over to InDesign, and I'm going to start laying it out. Layout is very straightforward thanks to InDesign, but what I'm going to do is grab one of my stories. I'll grab the volleyball one first and show you how I like to work this. So we're looking at the articles. I'm going to grab the volleyball story first. I'm not going to grab the headline just yet. I got this copy, and what I'm going to do, go back to InDesign, and I'm going to Control-V paste. Perfect. And just put it right in the middle. I will zoom in a little bit so we can all see it a little better. So I have my story. I'm going to line it up with one of my columns, and you can see it right there. It is not the whole piece, it's just whatever fits in that text box. That little plus sign on the bottom is going to tell you that there is more to it. What I like to do is I'm going to add a new paragraph style. If you're using an old InDesign document, you might have this already. If not, this will be a lot of help later. Edit this. So we're looking at our style options. What do I need to first consider? First is our font family. Like I said, we use Georgia, but you could use your preferred one. Here's Georgia, 12-point, kerning. We won't mess with the kerning yet. Size, underline ligatures, perfect. So we are now with Georgia, and then OK. And you can see everything turns to Georgia. We have a few more things in our guideline. So I'm going to go back here, click on the edit. Indents and spacings alignment. We use left justify. That's going to justify everything but the final row. First line indent, 6.3. That's about 1/4 of an inch. And you can see we have our correct style. We have our paragraphs being justified with left hanging. We have Georgia. We have 12. And now a lot of that formatting is already done. I don't know how big this is going to be. I think we're going to aim for about half of the page. So what I'm going to do is mock up this in such a way that it gets to here. If I want to put the next part over here, I'm going to click this red plus and drop it anywhere. And you can see it dropped everything, but all I have to do is shrink that and keep adding the red plus, and it will continue to make our little sections. Red plus right here. Let's say, for example, that I left a little bit overdone. I can't finish the whole thing. The window that I love to use most is this. I don't do a lot of editing except for the very obvious stuff in Google Drive. So I'll come over here and Control Y. That's going to bring up our editing view. This editing view is going to give us the entire text field. You can see where the paragraph breaks are. They're not the indents on here, just the text with your paragraph breaks. It'll also tell you what kind of paragraph it is. So if you have different paragraph styles, you can use that. It even shows me where my overset is. This shows me what is not included in the article. So if I need to edit to this size specifically, it'll tell me when I've hit the overset. Thankfully with this piece, I don't have to worry about that. And we can see it works all the way. I'm going to make a new text box. Let's see what our headline was. Our headline is Volleyball Wins State Championship. The 365 is my word count that I put on there. Once again, that's to help me with my 1,000 word. So there is our Volleyball Wins State Championship headline. A little small, little oddly spaced. That's because we're still using our basic paragraph. I'm going to make a new setting for our headline. So I'll come down here. I can double click on this, I think. I want to come over here, new paragraph style. New paragraph style, we'll call this headline. That way, I now have two, basic paragraph, and I can change that name. I'll change headline. So what are my rules of my headlines? What I'm going to do, I want to keep Georgia. I'm going to start at 30 font. I think it is okay that some headlines are not the same size as others. I think that one is an easy thing to change as long as it's not too much. I'm going to take away the indent, and I'm going to take away the left justified to just left. We have Georgia, we're at 30. I'm not going to make it bold or italicized. That's just not our style guide. So we have volleyball. What happened to the rest of our text? You can see the little red plus. That means it's overset. So I'll just drag it over, and you can see it's starting to unravel. If I made it a little bigger, you can see it'll automatically double line. Perfect. And then finally, we need a byline. So let's make a byline first. I don't have a byline on this one. By Sarah Jane, let's say. Copy, paste. So it's going to paste her byline by Sarah Jane. And for us, our byline is a different style as well. So I have a third one I'm going to make, call it byline. Our byline is going to use a different, it's going to use Bondi 72 caps. I'm going to change the indent. So you can see I have laid out just about one article. What I like to do is I actually like to go in here and once I have the basics of it laid out, that's when I do a lot of my editing. I edit for length, I edit for content, because there are times when I need to cut a lot more than I normally would in my preference. So I can come here, click Control Y. That's going to bring this up, Control Y, and I can start going through line by line. A couple things to keep in mind, things that I always see. Normally the attributions in our newspaper are wrong. They're normally leading in. They don't like said. They say talking about Coach Morgan explains. So that'd be a great example of something that would give its own line and turn this into a quote. We had the closest set of region play, Coach Morgan said. And so I'd go in through here like that. And you can see that changed a little bit with the overset. And I would edit for content. When in doubt, the last things that you are written are normally the things we want to get rid of first. So I would start looking here if I need to cut from a lot of content. We love ending on quotes. When in doubt, end on a quote, because normally the quotes are the most powerful piece, and they'll say things that really wrap it up. That set a tone of finishing strong, and that's pretty much what we did from that point on, period. Let me add another article, and then let's try to put a picture in. Let's go back. Let's get the Stewart profile. Copy and paste. It does not paste everything at once, which is very good. And we can see we're in our basic paragraph format, and I'll just fill this up. I'm gonna go down to my margin, skipping the gutter. I'm gonna line it up. And everything I'm doing, I know I might change later. There's nothing I'm attaching to saying this is how it has to look. I don't know exactly where my headline's gonna be. I'm gonna move everything in a moment. But right now I'm getting the best idea I have. I filled up a lot of it. I didn't even leave a lot of room for the headline, and you can see I have a small little red plus. I have something overset. Let's see how much. Control Y to get our favorite little view. You can see I have a pretty large amount of stuff overset. I'm gonna fix my size real quick. I'm gonna bring everything down even more to give me room for a headline and a byline. I'm going to insert a text box this time instead of, I don't have a headline for this. How about I put Mrs. Stewart profile? That's not a good headline, but it'll do for our case today. Change it to headline. Then let's make a byline real quick. By John Stamos. We need to change that to byline. So now we can start to see a little bit more of how our paper is going to look and going to sit. Right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink this a little bit more. And I'm going to add a picture to the first one. The picture is going to take up a lot of room. And then I'm going to see what room I can get left for the profile piece. Bring this down. Great. I have a lot of wiggle room with this piece. Place a picture. What I'm going to do first is come over here to the rectangle frame tool, or click F. F will take you right to that rectangle frame tool. And I'm just going to place it, let's start right in the middle. And you can barely see it in there. And then over here in the text wrap, I'm going to say wrap around with a bounding box. This is going to say words can't go through this. I'll give it a small margin of 1 millimeter all around, just in case. And you can see I have a box, and I'll put a picture in there in a moment. If I put it in a slightly different place, you can see the words kind of go alongside it. And when it actually goes away, it's kind of hard to tell. In this one, they felt like they could start to put words in there. For example, the words showcased get squashed and stretched. Showcased and this is a kind of a feature of justified text. When you're doing this, this goes back to our hierarchy where we don't want to have strange paragraph. So if I move it in, this is probably readable. I always like to try to eat into the entire column if possible. I think that just reads a little better, but you can see we lose more stuff. We lose more space. We could try to compromise in some way. maybe bring this in. We have about half of it. So we'll try that. Even if we don't have our picture yet, these boxes and these frames act like where the picture is going to go. We tried to think about our aspect ratio of the pictures. So this one would fit a square picture, but if we have something different, we would need to be cognizant of that. So let's go down to the Stewart profile. Let's talk about how to start cutting stories. We have a lot to cut out of here. If we want it to fit, we need to make sure we cut this much. Well, the first thing I see is sort of the last one. Don't be afraid of me. So next time you see a snacker in the front office, make sure you stop by to thank her. That's an easy thing to cut. It's really hard. Students like to think they need to end stories a certain way with like a call to action. They don't need that. And so what I do, I'm not going to do it right now, is go through this, start finding redundant quotes, start finding things that don't lift the story. And if I really wanted to keep this going, here's what I would do. Let's say I really loved this piece. Everything about it was perfect. I didn't feel like it would be worth it to lose something. What I would do is I'm going up here to my selection tool. I'm going to shrink this a little bit. And then I'm going to click that red plus. I'm going to put it on another page. Maybe I thought it could fit on this next page, even though it's sports. I'm going to put it there. And it's going to finish this column, let's say. What this looks like next is I'll come down here. I'll add something. Continued on page 2. Our style guidelines have this bold and italicized, so that way it helps the reader know the story isn't done. We actually leave on that, and then I'll put an abbreviated version of the headline down here and change that to headline. Instead of a byline, I'd put probably something like continued from previous page. That way if someone starts reading, they know it's not from there. So you can see, if I really love a piece and I can't cut it, no matter what I do, I can always kick it to the next page or kick it to a different page. I would try to cut it if possible. And finally, let's talk about how to add a picture. So we have a picture right here. I've made a box. I used this rectangle frame tool and I set a perimeter around it of about 1 millimeter. That way I know words aren't going to touch it, go behind it. Instead of insert picture, we have something called place. So file, place. Place is going to help us grab one. So let's say, for example, we have this picture. If I move it, you can see the picture moves with it. You can see it also is not the correct ratio. So I'm going to go in here, right click, fitting. We have two different options, fill frame proportionally and fit content proportionally. So we can either do prioritize the frame or prioritize the picture. If we fill frame proportionately, you can see that's one way. Then fit content proportionally is going to prioritize the picture itself. This picture is not a square. Our frame is a square. So if I really want to keep the picture, I will do the second option. If I want to fit the frame, then I'm going to do the first option. Neither one of them is bad or worse. It just is a choice you have to make. I can right click again, and I can add our caption setup, text before, after. You can add this as well. If you want a caption, put it down here. That'll work. One of our styles is we have a line that extends between articles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the line tool. I'm going to hold it, click down. You can see to make it straight, I have to make sure I'm holding shift. And you can see it draws itself like that. You can barely see it, and if I click off it, you actually won't see it. That's because our stroke size is non-existent, so I'm going to change it to 1 point. I think 1 point is a nice size. You may have something different. Some newspapers don't do this at all. I think that's a stylistic choice. We like it here. It makes our articles stand out a little better, so we can separate them. Now, most of the stuff after this is going to be preference. So for example, do you need to have all of these lined up? If not, you could probably get a little more room back by extending these. And everything you do, that's going to eat into the content on the next page. We don't have to worry about where each part of it falls because InDesign is going to set up the text in one large thing. It's one mega text box that it knows to break up. So if I'm okay changing this, even if I want 3 levels, I think that has more of a stair-step look, but if you're really trying to get size, you can. And all of these things just become the next step to laying out. Remember, the whole goal of it is to have a cohesive reading experience. You want it to be something where they're not aware they're even thinking about reading. They're not thinking about, oh, this was a newspaper that someone set up. They forgot to change the typeface. They forgot to change the layout. What we want is for them to be thinking about the state championship win. What we want them to think about is the Miss Stewart in the profile. What you're doing back to back with all these sections is page after page is trying to weave a cohesive design of these words. These words are written, more than likely, by a dozen or so different students who are going to have different types of talking, different ways that they inflect, especially the news ones you can change to be very much in your editorial guidelines. But you can see how every time we're going to do something that wants to be the same type of feeling. Let's make a banner over here. On top of our non-front pages, we normally have a banner that will go above, letting the reader know what section it is. I'm going to lower this just a bit. And so what that's going to look like is text box with our section. This one could be our sports section. This one, we could even make another paragraph type. I'm going to make this one a headline and then italicize it. And then I'm going to put it in the center. The center is going to help me organize it just a little bit so that it sits up there. Sports, page 2, and then I'm going to add a 2-point line. Once again, holding down Shift to get a flat line, go all the way to the end, and I'm going to change it from 0 point to 2 point. I think this 2 point is going to differentiate itself from the sections more, and you can see how we can make this bold if that is our style. Another thing I see a lot of students do is unintuitive article layout. So let me grab a new sports article and put it over here. All right, so we have this. I'm going to scroll down to my sports sections. How about this esports one? We have a great esports article here. This is a good example of one that I didn't need to touch hardly at all. I'm going to paste it in. And what I'm going to do is try to come up with an unintuitive layout. Hopefully our columns made it a little bit harder, but perhaps we wanted something like over here, and there was a picture. Maybe we're going to add a picture right here. So we can add a pretend picture right there. We'll add our text wrap and a little bit of cushion just in case we have words go over there. And so when we're reading this, we're going to start up here with our headline. So I'll just copy this headline. I'm reading, I go to my second one. My brain is thinking this. I could have some lines to differentiate it, but you can see how I would expect the next one to be here. And if this picture isn't totally relevant, I'm going to wonder why stuff is down here. And if I tried to squeeze a new article over here, the idea of which one would it belong to? Would it belong to the top one or the right one? So if I come over here and grab those Rangers article, it's a great example of one that needs to be broken up into paragraphs. Another big issue I see is using the same one paragraph to say the whole thing instead of a lot of small paragraphs. So you can see here, even with a line here, it'd be hard to know why this piece is not connected to this up here. So if we have a picture, it's going to help the layout if we moved it slightly differently. Even something like this, where we could bring this up closer to the article. It's not ideal. I would probably talk about swapping these two, making this sort of flattened, and then helping these go a little bit bigger just to fit everything in instead of trying to have an unintuitive layout. We want the articles to be close to each other. And if you have something like this, even if it's a great article, you have to cut for room. All right, so now we'll pretend we've placed more pictures, we placed a lot of articles, we've edited, we've cut all the stuff down. Now it's ready to go. We can save it and go File, Export. We're exporting into a PDF, and it'll put everything together into a nice paper. If you have overset text, it should tell you. So for example, if I export, you can see it's going to say, hey, you've got overset text on these 2 pages. That's something to make sure you settle and make sure you have all the stuff taken care of. Which one's the overset text? You got to look for the red plus. You export the paper and it should be ready to go. Try to keep in mind that everything you're doing is serving the consistency, the readability, and the formatting. You are trying to keep the vivid and continuous dream of reading because it's so easy to get distracted. People do not need another reason to stop reading. There's phones, there's business, there's people's life and obligations. Anything of those can take someone away from the story. And we want to keep them reading as much as possible. So all of this editing is meant to be another way to help them stay in the paper, stay reading.